Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. I'm your host, Deb Philman. At The Reason We Learn, we aspire to be part of the solution. The purpose of this show is to take a good, honest, potentially painful look at the way kids are being educated. We know we can do better, and this is where we'll talk about how. Let's learn something. So earlier today, someone in my audience wrote me and asked if I would be willing to participate in a debate or roundtable with someone she knew to address the question of whether or not teachers and professors are inappropriately indoctrinating students, specifically in left-wing ideas, and to encourage them to become activists. I mean, there were sort of multiple parts of this. And I'm thinking about whether I'll participate. I haven't decided yet, but I thought I would make a video, at least for my audience, to explain where I stand on this and why I say they are. And I want to stick to K12. That's my area of expertise. I can comment ad nauseum on higher education based on my personal opinion, but I haven't done as much research as I have in the K12 space. So, I'm going to stick to that. But what I'm about to tell you about indoctrination is true across the board. The word indoctrination has a definition. It has a definition, and here it is. The process of repeating an idea or belief to someone until they accept it without criticism or question. Okay? Another way to frame it would be presenting an idea or belief to someone such that they must accept it uncritically. So in other words, you present something as fact that is in fact opinion or controversial at the very minimum and not objectively true, like water is wet. Okay, well, if I teach a 6-year-old that water is wet, I'm not really teaching anything they couldn't verify given the skills and vocabulary they have with their 5 senses. Asking them to accept that uncritically isn't me asking too much of them. If I move up the knowledge food chain a little bit and I ask them to accept the fact that summer is hot, I'm, indoctrinating a little bit, because summer, if we go by the definition of which months of the year constitutes summer, may not be hot in Australia because they're the opposite for those months. If we go by summer being based specifically on temperature, then maybe it's true. But asking them to accept it uncritically without question is still a little bit more indoctrination, at least into a northern hemisphere centric way of defining summer than it would otherwise be. Now keep on going and get all the way up to a concept like gender. If I teach someone of any age, really, but especially a young student who is compelled to be in my presence every single day, who has probably been told by their parents and also other teachers and the school at large that they need to listen to me and they need to be respectful to me, and there's a sort of undercurrent of or else they could be disciplined, something bad could happen, etc. At a minimum, they might be judged by their peers, even if they thought I, the teacher, were the nicest person in the world and I wouldn't do anything, mean to them. They might be wondering what this room full of brand new people they never met before, total strangers, might think. So in that environment, if I present this graphic, the gender unicorn, created by Trans Student Educational Resources, which is widely used in the public schools right here in my home state of North Carolina and in many other states. And I present this to a group of kindergartners and I tell them there's such a thing as gender identity, gender expression, sex assigned at birth. I use that vocabulary. If I call other intersex, if I present all the information you see in this graphic to the students, say, this is the gender unicorn, children, and this is how humans are, and this is what humans are about, and this is what people are physically attracted to, this is emotional attracted, this is how it breaks down. And this is how it is. This is how it works in the world with human beings. I am 100% indoctrinating. And here is why. Because I'm presenting something uncritically myself. I'm presenting it like it's some kind of scientific fact, like the water is wet. I'm even way past summer is hot. And I'm all the way to, cockroaches are delicious territory in terms of opinion level. This graphic is widely disputed as being an accurate, scientifically accurate representation of these concepts. These are concepts. These are ideas. These are not factoids. These are concepts. In fact, they are concepts that are part of a theory. And I'm being generous to call it a theory because theories even have to be tested scientifically. None of this is backed up by scientific evidence. Any research done that supports this was circular. It was done by the people who already think this to support their own position. There is no third-party objective evidence that anything presented in this graphic is irrefutable, immutable truth. And if I presented this to a group of college students and said, this is so, I would still be attempting to indoctrinate them. The difference is they would be capable of resisting the indoctrination more, because even though the or else you might get a bad grade is hanging out there, there is still a vocabulary they have, a level of personal life experience they have, and so on, that would facilitate disagreement better than the 6-year-old has, or the 8-year-old, or even the 12-year-old, or the 15-year-old, or the 16-year-old. Anybody who's a minor child, not yet graduated high school, least of all one who cannot read, who has to have this read to them. Literally every piece of this has to be translated by an adult. This is textbook indoctrination. You're presenting something that is not fact uncritically as if it is. You are presenting it in such a way that makes it fairly clear it should not be challenged. In fact, when they present this information in the schools, it's typically included in the conversation that any challenge to this would be classified as abuse or bigotry or bullying or hate speech. So they're preempting any criticism by classifying criticism or rejection or serious questions about it, as if the 6 and 7-year-olds would be capable of that, as bad. You're a bad person. You're not a caring person. So you're not only being indoctrinated in terms of you must believe this to be true, but you're being indoctrinated to believe that people who don't believe it are bad. You're getting a double whammy. The latter part is unspoken in that way. They probably aren't sitting in the classroom and saying, if your parents don't agree with this, they're terrible people, but it is always implied. This is how we treat people. This is what we accept. This is how we are inclusive. This is how we are loving. This is how we care for our fellow man. This is what we do. And they tend to use that. They tend to say we. They don't even personalize and say, this is what I think. I would have more respect for the teachers if they did that. We do this and we do that, and this is what we say, and this is what is, and these are the people in your class, and everyone is on a spectrum. I mean, they're presenting ideas that are highly controversial, uncritically themselves, to an audience that is not capable of criticizing them, questioning them, or anything remotely like that. To contextualize a little further, imagine it's not a gender unicorn, but instead it is the story of the resurrection. It's not presented as some people believe this. Some people believe that Jesus rose from the dead. He died on the cross, and he rose from the dead, and he left the tomb. Let's say this was an infographic about that. And you're probably saying to yourself, well, Deb, that's a religion, and obviously we have separation of church and state. Leave that aside. Leave aside that it is a religion. Many, many people believe it. Would you agree that there are 1 billion people on the planet who believe it to be true? They believe it. They believe it as much as the people who present the gender unicorn believe this. And please, my Christian friends, do not come at me with hate about how I'm comparing this to Christianity. This is purely to illustrate the point that there's a difference between faith and belief and fact. And I think we can all agree, whatever our faith traditions are privately, that the public schools and even the private schools, but at least parents are choosing that, the public schools have absolutely no business presenting something as fact to a captive audience that are literally required to be there using taxpayer dollars to pay for it. That is not fact. And your visceral reaction either way to the notion that they might be teaching the resurrection this way, like, this is true. Jesus rose from the dead, and this is so and so and so and so. And plenty of the people who present gender unicorn would immediately identify that as indoctrination. They would say you're indoctrinating the child because they cannot possibly question that or criticize it. Especially when you're starting with, preschoolers or kindergartners and you present the resurrection, nobody would dispute that. It is textbook indoctrination. The difference being that it's the parents' prerogative to indoctrinate with their religion. If they sincerely believe it is best for their child to believe that, and they believe it uncritically, and that has served them well, and they want to pass that to their child, that is their prerogative. And they're doing it on their own time, using their own money, et cetera, et cetera. Public school is doing the exact same thing, different story, different faith-based system, different breakdown of the fabric of morality and all that, but it's the same idea. You're taking something that you believe, teacher, school district, whatever, and you may believe it with your whole heart. You may think this is the way everyone should believe. This is the way everyone should think the world works and that human beings function. That's your prerogative. I can't stop you. This is the United States of America. Believe what you want and even say what you want in the privacy of your own life. But when you present this to young children, when you present this really to anyone in a captive situation where they must abide by it, as if it's as factual as 2 times 2 equals 4, without criticism, you're indoctrinating. And I would take it a step farther. When you present it to people who absolutely lack the cognitive ability, the life experience, the vocabulary, and the emotional and psychological maturity to challenge this information, you are taking advantage, you are manipulating, and you're abusing. And before you turn around and say, well, isn't that what's happening when the religious person presents their religion to their child? I would say no, and here is why. This particular ideology is saying something about what things mean to the child about the child. It is telling them not to believe how they feel about themselves, what their parents are saying about them, what their doctor might be saying about them. It is teaching them something that will confuse them because it is opposite of the reality that we can measure. There's 2 physical sexes on the planet. You might believe that they render some other way, but that is a fact. So you're creating confusion where there wasn't any before. You're creating a dissonance. You are triangulating with parents who are teaching something different. And there is no benefit to it. There's no benefit. And so what's the benefit of believing the resurrection? Well, a lot of people believe that gives the person hope and teaches them they're saved and that somebody loves them and there's redemption for sins and so forth and so on. But more importantly than all of that, even if the child's like, I don't believe that, there's nothing about teaching that in and of itself that harms the child, that makes the child confused in such a way that they might harm themselves, that they might decide, I'm bad, I'm wrong in my body. I need to do something dramatic and permanent to my body in order to fit in and be okay. And you might come back at me and say, well, what if the religious indoctrination says all the people who don't believe what we believe are bad people? Well, I would take issue with that. And I would say that's bad. And you shouldn't do that to children. And I have no qualms about saying that, even to friends of mine of faith. But I also happen to know that the people I'm friends with who are of faith don't do that. They don't tell their children everyone who doesn't agree with us is a bad person. They teach their children what they believe. And they teach them other people believe different things. And they explain why they want them to believe what they believe and how they think it's going to be good for them. And they tend to give reasons, but they're very clear that they're teaching belief. They're not teaching belief masquerading as fact. They're saying it's faith. We want you to have faith. We want you to believe what we believe, and this is what we believe. This isn't being presented as a belief. This is being presented as a fact. So that's the difference. Yes, they're both indoctrination because they're being presented uncritically and the person receiving it is not capable of criticizing, but at least one is honestly presented as a faith. That's the difference. If you appreciate the content I'm providing here at The Reason We Learn, I hope you'll consider supporting it. You can do that a number of ways. You can subscribe to the channel. You can like and comment on the videos. You can share the videos. You can join my Substack at thereasonwelearn.substack.com. You can join my locals at thereasonwelearn.locals.com. I also have a Subscribe store and a Patreon where you can make donations. I also have merchandise. Not a lot, but it's there. And you can find it through my Linktree, which is linked above. Your support helps me continue to produce content like this so I can help you help your kids. Thank you very much for listening. Let's get back to the content. But what I find fascinating is most people who could look at this and say, what's the problem? And, this is an indoctrination, whatever, would immediately recognize the teaching of the resurrection as indoctrination and argue about it and say it should never be done in a public school. You should never do that. Why would you teach that? That's religion. Why is it religion? That's the bigger question. Why is it religion? Is it religion because you know it is and we already call it that? Or is it religion because it's faith-based? Because when you have the answer to that question, you really understand why this is wrong. It's religion because it's faith-based. It is not empirically provable or even demonstrable. It's simply not. Every single one of these concepts is based on belief. Okay? And you can say, well, I looked and I saw evidence. So do Christians. Christians will tell you they look and they see evidence for Christ and they see evidence for their belief in Christ and so forth and so on. Absolutely, they'll tell you that. But like I said, at least most Christians will be honest and say, but it's still ultimately my belief system. It's my evidence. It's what I see. I recognize there are other people who aren't going to see what I see. I feel sad about that, but that's how it is. And we all know that anyone who would go farther than that, who would be like, and you're all evil if you don't see it my way, they're not likely to win over any converts. And we would definitely oppose them being around children, least of all children who are a captive audience paid for with our tax dollars. But we will tolerate this. Not just tolerate, we're forced to stomach it. We're forced to stomach it. We're forced to celebrate it. And our children are forced to celebrate it. And then what's worse is we parents are forced to deal with the fact that our children have been indoctrinated into these ideas. And we are in the unpleasant position of having to unindoctrinate them, which causes further confusion and frustration on their part. They want to do well in school. They want to fit in. They want to please their teachers. This is cruel to the child, it's cruel to the family, and it's intentional. It's intentional, but it is absolutely indoctrination. There's no way you can argue otherwise. It fits the technical definition. Now, let's get to the part real quickly about the conspiracy theory that they're indoctrinating into left-wing ideals. Well, let's define. I defined for you indoctrination, right? Teaching ideas and concepts such that they must be accepted uncritically. Teaching ideas and concepts to people who are incapable psychologically or cognitively of criticizing them. So this fits the bill in elementary school. It fits the bill, in my opinion, all the way up the K12 line, but definitely elementary school. Well, left wing, as I would define it, is anything that says I cannot say no to my individual rights being challenged or violated. Okay. So basically it's anything to the left of respect for my individual liberty and my right to say no. It's also anything to the left of full support for free market capitalism, not fraud, informed consensual exchange, mutually beneficial mutual exchange. Okay. So anything to the left of that, anything that says, no, someone needs to come in and control those transactions. Someone needs to come in and control your interaction with other people. Somebody needs to limit it, regulate it, tell you what to do, tell you when you can say yes and when you can say no, even when it doesn't hurt anybody else, even when it, it's consensual and you're an adult and so on and so forth. Anything to the left of that is left wing. Teaching this to children is by definition left wing, not because of the indoctrination. There could be right wing indoctrination in schools. If you uncritically teach that America is the greatest country on planet Earth to young children, you are indoctrinating. What I believe is that in the grammar phase, there was elementary school of education, you should be as close to empirical fact as possible at all times. You should refrain from teaching complex concepts and analytical thinking because their brains aren't capable of challenging what you're saying. They're not even capable of challenging their own thoughts. They don't really have that ability. So most of the things you could present that are conceptual are beyond their reach, certainly till you get up towards 5th grade. And even then, so you should be very careful that what you're presenting that they should not criticize or be in a position to criticize is factual, is at minimum not controversial, is widely accepted by the vast majority of people. Okay? So, if you wanted to teach 5th graders, for example, that Hitler was a bad guy, you could probably do that. Even though technically that's classified as an opinion, you got tons of empirical evidence to support that opinion. Tons. So you're on solid ground. You're on solid ground there, okay? In teaching something that is technically, by the most strict definition, opinion to a group of students uncritically. Okay? But that's the benchmark. That's the benchmark. We don't take concepts that are difficult even for adults to understand, and this graphic gender unicorn thing is, and go down to 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds and present it like this is so. We don't do that. So the reason it infringes on rights is just that. They have an individual right to not be defrauded. When you lie to children, when you put them in an educational setting and tell them you're going to teach them, you're going to enhance their lives. You're going to teach them how to think, not what to think. You're going to teach them how to live life on planet Earth. You're defrauding them. You're violating their right to the truth. That, by definition, is left wing. When you further teach them that they have an obligation, in other words, to be a good person is to accept all this information uncritically, and this is the tip of the iceberg. We haven't even talked about BLM and gender and race essentialism or anything like that. But anytime you teach them that other people have a claim on their forbearance, their celebration, their acceptance, their uncritical love, whatever, you're saying between the lines, you can't say no to association with this. You can't say no to these ideas. You're violating their individual rights to freedom of expression, freedom of association. They're not bothering anybody. If they just say, I don't agree. I don't like this. I don't want to do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to hurt anybody. Just not going to agree with this. Won't do it. Now you're deeming them bad. Now they may even be punished for hate speech. There are students getting suspended for not using neopronouns. You're literally violating their rights. That is left wing. So it's not just that, gender ideology is left wing. That's getting, it is, but, in terms of where we were going to situate this in the political spectrum, but I'm talking more philosophically. It's left wing because it's to the left of individual liberty. It others people, namely those who don't agree with this, and it teaches children that what they think about others is the most important thing. It also teaches them what things mean that they may not mean. So once upon a time, we had free to be you and me, which said, William wants a doll. It means nothing. It means William wants a doll. Today, we say William wants a doll. It means William's a girl. When you teach a young child that something means something that it either may or may not mean or does not mean, that you cannot possibly know that it means, that's indoctrination and a violation of their rights. Their right to autonomy, their right to their own expression, and their right to an education. And when I say they have a right to an education, I don't mean they have a right to schooling, because that requires the labor of others. But they have a right to think for themselves and find out about the world themselves, free from indoctrination. And that's what an education is. It's not a thing that you provide. It's the ability to say no to bad ideas and the ability to say yes to the ideas that serve the individual, that they go out and get for themselves. So I don't know if I'm going to debate this person. I don't know what I'm going to do. But I thought I would come here and explain to you where I stand on these things and why I call this indoctrination, what it is and what it isn't. And you be the judge. If you think I could prevail in a debate of ideas like this, let me know in the comments. I don't know. I'm not sure about if I care about winning. I certainly just don't want to find myself sitting there with a dishonest interlocutor who's going to change the definition of indoctrination on the fly and just play word games with me. Because I'm very clear. I do not mince words. I say what I think and then I'm done. We'll see. I'm thinking about it. Anyway, if you find this content useful, helpful, informative, I hope you will support the channel by subscribing, like this video, comment on this video, share this video. And if you would like to provide me with a little bit more support, I would greatly appreciate it. I have a Subscribestar, Patreon, Minds, and Substack. Thanks for watching. Have a great weekend.